Do you want to lay them out
Sure.
for us? That would be great. I would. I don't know. I don't know if they're easily outlineable.
It's pretty.
But
It's a
I would
pretty
love to
simple
hear them.
pitch.
All right.
The essence of it is that to become a human entangled in other humans, to become a citizen of the world, to become a fully actualized person, involves stepping out of oneself and communing and connecting with other people, and finding in interactions with other people personal satisfaction. And that comes from the fact that there are animal spirits, as John Maynard Keynes called them, of humanity that are satisfied only in the constructive interaction with humanity as a whole. And what
language.
Gaming does is it provides a synthetic reproduction of those phenomena that are totally self-involved and that allow people to basically eschew society and eschew humanity at large, because there is this box in their house that gives them all of the same feedbacks that one would get out in the world synthetically, and that then they are able to basically subsist on that, and by subsisting on that are never really drawn out into the world, are never drawn out into other people. And that's how you get the phenomenon of gamers, quote unquote, as a class, and their sort of reactionary, libertarian sense of solipsism, because they do not have any sense of the world outside themselves, because they have recreated all of the feedback loops and connections of the world in gaming, instead of out in the world where they should be gaining an understanding of their fellow humans.
So that's really interesting. I have a lot to say about that, but that's certainly the most compelling argument against gaming I've ever heard. It has, as you say, there's some Keynes in there, but I think there's a very a very sort of German idealism and German sort of post-idealism in there that I find, of course, very compelling. I mean, we don't want to, it would certainly not endear us to a lot of people online to say that this is Heideggerian in any sort of good sense, but there's a sense that it is. Like, there's a sense that the idea of having to go out and have your, body and soul interact with someone else's body and soul to sort of determine who you are. And it's a very philosophically sound concept, I think. I guess my question is, how much do you see this as... So I want to talk about the class of gamers. Like, let's put that aside, because I don't want to forget about that, because I think that's a really interesting point, and I probably agree with you more than disagree with you on that. But do you see this as more of a... Is this a problem that is strictly related to gaming, or is this something that, given proper technological advancement, like other aesthetic forms could do? For instance, how is it different from, say, reading a Dickens novel, where you get the cast of humanity and you can sort of just like sit in your room and feel like you've gone out in the streets and met, I don't know, like the bagman or something like that. Like, you've met the poor, you've met other people, you've interacted in a certain kind of like virtual way.
I think the difference is that gaming provides an entire apparatus of stimuli. Like, you read a book at a fundamental level, all you're doing is reading. And like, as much as you might get caught up in the world that's being created by the author, you're sitting in a room and you're reading a thing. But if you're gaming, if you're behind the controller, the system of goals and then rewards that you get from gaming simulate in a more vivid and specific manner the system of rewards and interactions that you'd get in the real world. Like, you're not just in a fantasy world. You're in a fantasy world that is designed to provide you with those like Skinner-style pellets of reinforcement. Like to game and to own someone, quote unquote, to like to pwn someone in multiplayer
Richard
or to
Dawkins over here.
defeat a level. That is to feel a sense of accomplishment, like a genuine, like you if you defeat a difficult level in a video game or defeat a challenging opponent in multiplayer, you have accomplished something at a psychic level, and in a way that I think is indistinguishable chemically from doing so in the real world, in a way that passively observing a piece of art doesn't provide. Like, I feel like you're getting a visceral sense of accomplishment that is unique, that no other art form can provide, because all other art forms are essentially passive. Only video games give you a pseudo sense of accomplishment.
So I think that's pseudo something that's really important to put pressure on, though, where like there's been a lot of people who have thought about this, and I'm sure this, this isn't like a super new thought, but the idea that all of these accomplishments, right, when you get to the top of the mountain, in any sort of gaming, you think there's going to be some sort of like meaningful reward. So like MMORPGs are perfect for this, where like grinding levels gives you the sense of like, oh, when I'm at level 99 or when I'm at the level cap, I'll have achieved happiness, or when I get this rare drop, I'll have achieved happiness. And when you actually get it, it's like you don't feel as good as you think you would feel. And there's a sense there's a sense that plays right into what you're saying, where it just it increases your anime, and like just distances you more and more from the real world when you can actually have those experiences and feel good about people and other things happening in the world. And there's another way where like you want to say, and this I guess would be my defense of video games, that there's no better account for what capitalism and late capitalism particularly do to a person than to give them like something that feels like an accomplishment in the moment, like a psychic accomplishment, but really gives them nothing.
Well, yeah, that's true, and but that is the fundamental trap of postmodern late capitalist entertainments in general, is that you can underline at every level in any kind of piece of art the degree to which the consumption of that art is insufficient to be a real, to have a real life, to that this thing, that watching this thing isn't real rebellion, that playing this game isn't real life. But at the end of the day, that subversive element of it has less practical impact on the person absorbing that thing than the just reality of their passive consumption of it. Like it's the mode of consumption that is determinative, because how fucking many times can people point out, I understand. This is irony right now. Like, I understand that that like doing a tweet isn't activism, and I understand that watching a TV show isn't genuine opposition to the current regime, but the acknowledgement of it is sort of a pressure release valve that frees you of the responsibility of transcending that challenge that you have highlighted, the paradox. Like, by acknowledging that this is insufficient, you have basically shown to others that you were aware of this paradox, and that is sufficient.
Right, yeah.
That ends up, for most people, you can argue, well, philosophically that's not sufficient, but in practice, it ends up being sufficient to provide a sense that one has transcended it by acknowledging it.
It's very Adornian critique. Yeah, no, that's an interesting point, I guess. So the way I would press you on that, and what I want to ask you to clarify a bit, so like, is your this actually maybe even keys in a little bit to your thinking on Prestige TV, which is I found totally fascinating, particularly because you did the thing that I love the most when smart critics do it, which is you say, like, look, it doesn't matter if you like something or don't like something. Like, liking it isn't the point. Taste is completely, it doesn't matter, which I appreciated quite a bit. But I'm wondering how much of your concern with video games from a social level has to do with, you know, the structure of the piece itself, and how much it has to do with a lack of faith in like people actually taking it as entertainment and not as something more serious.
I mean, I think, but that's the thing, is that we live in a world where entertainment has consumed reality. I mean, there's a game show host, president. I mean,
yeah.
the idea that we can separate entertainment from action and praxis is, I think, absolutely absurd. Like we have been consumed by spectacle to a degree that does not allow us to separate these things into different categories.
It's fast. I never would have, and I'm just throwing out names because it's fun, because this is the most sort of like, for a while, this is the most philosophically robust chat I've had. But like, it amazes me. I wouldn't have pegged you as like a Debordian, like, sort of like a.
I mean, yeah, I like materialism. I'm a big fan, but like, it's just, you at some point you have to look around you and acknowledge what's happening. I think anybody who wants to reject the Debordian critique of modern society is at a certain point just being willfully sort of stubborn, because how else do you define what we live in? How else do you live? Yeah. How else can you explain a world where, I've talked about this on Chapo, a woman from Ohio who is a member of the working class and has never voted in her life because, as she said, she didn't want to make an uninformed choice, in 2016 knocked on doors for Donald Trump because he spoke to her. What did that mean? It means that for her, politics was a channel on the TV. And before Trump, it was boring, so she turned the channel. And right. Trump made her stop and listen, and she was enraptured. And so that made her an active, political, engaged citizen. Like, that's a world where entertainment has basically conditioned us in a way that is transcendent of anything else.
So like you say at the end of your Prestige TV piece, that like we deserve better than Prestige TV, and I think that's like, that idea of a horizon beyond is what I liked the best about that piece. Like, it was, you know, I think the most dangerous thing about any kind of art, and this includes video games, is imagining that like what we have right now is sufficient, right? Like the idea that like we could never create better, or like this is enough, like living in a golden age is enough.
That was my, I mean, I feel like I didn't really get it across in the piece, but my main objection to the golden age of TV thing is that it's the complacency that it builds. Because it really does, like, all of the shows, from the very best TV shows to the stuff like Westworld, because that was a big thing, is a lot of people said, well, hey, I don't think Westworld's that good, and I'm a TV critic, so fuck you. But, like, okay, it's still in the same ballpark. And, like, that band of art, it's to use an obsolete term, it's middle brow. Like, there is no avant-garde Prestige TV. That's not a thing. Like, there is nothing in the Prestige TV wheelhouse that can be considered truly challenging. And you have a whole generation of writers saying, this is enough. This is great. We don't need books. They say it. They explicitly say it. Books and movies are over. TV is the new art. But it is in a narrow band of middle brow taste that we're supposed to take as good as we can get. And that is my main objection.
And I actually, so to say, like, to kind of like quantify, because I'm doing the thing I always do with this is always the danger when I talk to someone I disagree with. I end up like sympathizing with a number of their points and having to complicate my own thinking. So I mean, it's good. But like to clarify, I think that's absolutely right about TV. I think the complacency in the idea of a golden age is super important to push against. And I liked your piece a lot for that. It's in Current Affairs. You should all go read it. The question I have, and I think like the question that your concerns about gaming and your concerns about the spectacle, and this is actually something that I've always found insufficient and Debord as well. You know, is there, and you could say no, but I'll ask you to defend it. Is there any place in the world then for art? Like, what would be good art in this world that you're imagining if everything is sort of like always already co-opted by spectacle.
I mean, yeah, that's a good point. And I would say that if you want to be rigid about it, if you really want to, and if you ask me after I've had a few, I will probably say no. There's nothing. There's no place. I'd say that all
Okay.
art serves the status quo and is reactionary in the situation we live in now. I mean, it's very hard to watch the opposition to this sort of carnivalesque horror of the Trump presidency emerge in and be channeled into these weird fantasy narratives created by books and movies, and not feel like all of this is a mistake and all of this is
Yeah.
bad. But I guess my argument would just be vis-a-vis gaming is that games are worse. Like, I would say that at the base, maybe you couldn't defend any of them, but gaming is the least defensible because the fantasy of agency in it really does create the danger of putting one in a absolute trance where we've replicated all of the feedback loops of lived life in a virtual world, and that those can easily overcome everything else. I mean, there's a reason that the gamer fail son is at this point, recognized cliche and trope, because
Sure.
the life of being in your parents' basement without prospects would be unimaginable, would be something that one would have to push against, that one would have to find intolerable, unless there was an outlet for all of that self-actualizing activity in a virtual form that they could replicate without leaving the basement. And that's the thing, is that, like, the gamer, quote unquote, as a self-conceived identity, I think we would both agree is incredibly pernicious and awful and
I agree with that
reactionary.
completely. I think it's extremely reactionary. I think what's worse is that it's reactionary in terms of, and this is something I've had like a sort of nascent critique of for a long time about like nerd culture or something like that, which I think goes hand in hand, right? Where like, in fact, the thing that you are finding a base in or finding a foundation in, that you are, you know, turning your reactionary, fervor towards actualizing in the world is purely something that's sold in the market, right? And I think like on some level, what I would totally agree with you on is valorizing the actual sort of like plot, characters, and like stories of video games, movies, television is super dangerous. Like even smart political shows that like The Wire, I think is a smart political show. But like the people who love Omar or Stringer Bell are terrible. Or like, I think going back to a podcast that'll be out by the time we're talking, talking about Felix about Metal Gear, or Hazelman Fortin about walking simulators that I find really interesting. The point of those games ultimately is the story they tell to the audience, not the actual like people in it. It doesn't matter if you like Solid Snake or not. And if you think it does, and that becomes part of your identity, yeah, man, that's going to be really, really bad.
Well, that's the thing, is that unique among modern art forms is that gaming has produced the gamer. I mean, yes, there are people who consider themselves cineasts, and there is like a sad a group of, but like, I mean, even in prestige TV, something that has become like a consumer of, I mean, how many millions of people sort of define their cultural diet by what they watch on TV? How many of them would call themselves TV people? Basically none. And
Right.
then there's a smaller group of tweety nerds on the coast who consider themselves cineasts. But gamer is a genuine identity in modern America. As Ian Miles Chong said, my ideology is pro-consumer and pro-gamer. And
Yeah.
people accept that and absorb that and say, that's me. I'm a gamer. And I cannot imagine a more pernicious thing than that, than people defining themselves by the fucking capitalist products that they consume, and then generating these insanely horrible reactionary ideologies out of what they would prefer to see. Because if you're in a room with a screen and it's you interacting with it, why would you not, at the end of the day, absorb an idea of the world as one where you are catered to specifically and individually? Where the idea that there are other perspectives and there are other people out there with other lived experiences and other ideas become totally alien, and you would be unable to understand that. Who are these people? They must have some weird agenda. They must be SJWs. They must want to ruin my fun out of spite, because I cannot conceive of a world where anyone else has a different experience than mine. Why? Because my world is this room and this game that I'm playing.
Yeah. No, you make a really good point. I'm having a hard time formulating my objection. I guess, first off, the objection would be, or the question would be, and maybe I can ask you a question and I can give myself a little bit of time. So is there anyone who could play a game and get something out of it? Is there any positive to get out of a game? So like, you don't have to, I won't put you in the awkward position of saying whether or not I'm a good person or not. That would be unfair of me. But say like, is there any possibility that someone picks up a game, and let's say it's like a smart game, it's not just like a blockbuster, or like a whatever, shoot 'em up. Maybe it is, but like they get is it possible for them to actually pick it up, not take on the identity of gamer, which I will 100% agree with you is like super pernicious and troubling, and just play it and get something out of it, as one would say like, I went to the cinema and I saw, Apocalypse Now or something like that. And like I got something out of it. Is it possible for that to happen with video games, or is it 100% pure negativity?
No, absolutely. I'm sure that plenty of people are able to game and still be citizens, still be human beings, still understand that there are people outside of their fucking room. Absolutely. But not everybody who smokes cigarettes gets cancer. It's like there are plenty of things that are recognized socially as pernicious that are not universally destructive, but we recognize that the sort of critical mass of impact is negative. And I think that's all I would say about games. I would certainly never make a totalizing claim, but I would say that the preponderance of impact by gaming is negative.
So tell me why it's not like just a historical blip, because you think about something like futurism, right? And futurism is this but like for the audience, futurism is this like fetishization of technology that generally is linked to the rise of the fascist right in Germany. So like it is a fetishization of war. It's a fetishization of just like the angles,
speed,
and speed, speed, angles, anything like the basically, if you've ever read or seen J.G. Ballard's Crash, or the film version of it, Cronenberg's Crash, like it would be that without any sort of sense of critiques or satirical irony or anything like that. It's just a pure obsession with machines. You could argue that then technology, insofar as it lends itself to this sort of war-like or trends towards warlike fetishization, technology also has a negative net impact, much like games. So why would we sort of like not position this moment in time in the same way as we did with, say, like the futurists in the 20s and 30s?
I guess at the point I would probably argue that all of these things are pernicious. I feel like I feel like technology is alienating at a basic point. And like the point of Marxism and socialism is that it basically tames the alienation that is wrought by technological innovation in a way that directs its conscious direction towards human ends, but like basically a collective understanding that these forces need to be channeled, and I think that gaming is just basically the end result. It is the perniciousness of technology personalized and made into a individual sort of coping mechanism for the alienation provoked by it.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, honestly, that would make some sense. I guess yeah, on one hand, I think if you're willing to say that like technology itself is also pernicious, then I don't actually have a claim. That's just like a very strong and and pure position that like you can either agree with or disagree with. But the other thing I'd say is I think on some level your understanding, and this isn't a slight against you, it's just a disagreement. Your understanding of sort of like Marxism or Marxist-Leninism is like is towards technology itself being alienating, whereas I would say that it's much more about the labor relation or sort of like the exploitation of the worker.
Hold on a minute, both. Like that's one element of it. That's an element of it. I would not say that either the alienation of labor is essential, but I don't know how you can argue at any level that technology. I mean, what is technology at modern technology at a certain level other than the ability to abstract things away from individual relationships?
You're right. I mean, Marx calls it dead labor for a reason. It's like it's not good. I would agree with you. Like automation technology is like hugely bad. But in my mind, it's sort of like, so Marx describes I don't know the last time you picked up Das Kapital, but Marx describes rivers or like natural things like in the world as like free inputs, right? Or that's the translation that I have anyway. And to me, in some ways, technology acts as a kind of free input in under like socialism or communism, where you would have like, yeah, it's just a machine. It does things. Like you can automate things and not make them bad, right? It doesn't have to be pernicious. It's only pernicious because, of course, the technology would be used to further the exploitation of the worker, right?
No, here's the thing. Technology is liberatory to the degree to which there is a collective endeavor to channel its energies and powers.
Oh,
what
okay.
Gaming is an individualized fantasy, a coping where the alienation created by capital, instead of being confronted and collectively challenged, is turned into a soporific for the individual. Like instead of getting together with my fellow humans and saying, this alienation cannot stand, these forces need to be taken control of and put in a direction that liberates all of us, instead say, well, it's fine. I've got my room and I've got my goddamn gaming system. And I can reproduce all of those interactions, all of the things that make me a human, all of those things that fill me with a sense of accomplishment, that make me feel like I am living, and reproduce them virtually without ever interacting with another person.
Man, that is I actually don't have anything to say to that. That's actually a very good point. I think you could definitely, and I would agree with you. And I don't know, I guess my only defense would be I'm interested in it from an aesthetic level, while acknowledging that it's pernicious in that way. But then, you know what Adorno would say of me at that point, that I'm basically like just a fascist myself. Which, maybe as a
well, point. No, here's the thing. It's like, I am not judging anyone who games.
No, I'm not assuming you are.
It's just I look upon gaming and I just see sort of the mechanism by which technological alienation protects itself from human intervention.
No, and of course you're right, because you can argue that art itself is a kind of onanistic process, and millions of people, or not millions of people, good lord, hundreds of authors over time have basically argued that through whatever metaphors they want about jerking off. But onanism and total solipsism are different, right? Where if I'm taking your point correctly, like even if you're watching a TV show, you might talk about that TV show with people, or even if you're reading a book and you get so into the book that you become, I don't know, young Werther or something like that, like someone, the figure who is just like totally isolated, totally disconnected from anyone. You become Quixote, right? You still have Sancho Panza. You still have people you meet in the streets. You still have to deal with people in the world. Whereas in gaming, you truly can delve into a truly like isolated world. Which, yeah, I would say that is uniquely technological and uniquely dangerous.
Yes, I would agree with that.
All right. Well,